Back in the mid-60s, Datsun grabbed a toehold in the American sports car market that soon spread to the racetrack. Bob Sharp won a national championship in 1967 in a 1600 Roadster, and that car's ongoing success paved the way for a pair of speedy siblings to arrive in 1970. The 240Z established a decade-long dynasty in both IMSA and SCCA racing, while the brand's reputation was further enhanced when the 510 sedan came on the scene and conquered club racing and the Trans Am series. For decades, Datsuns and then Nissans tore up the tracks and record books in virtually every type of racing. And that legacy is why they've been named the featured marque at the 41st running of the Mitty at Road Atlanta. Today on Trackside Time Machines, presented by RockAuto.com, we'll show you race cars from B to Z after Z after Z. You get the idea. Hello and welcome to Road Atlanta, about 1 hour's drive outside of Atlanta, Georgia. And we're here this weekend for one of the most prestigious vintage racing events in the whole country. It's called the Mitty. And this year, the featured marques are Datsun and Nissan. What a great racing history those two marques have had. Going all the way back to cars like this, the 510 sedan, this one driven by our Grand Marshal this weekend, John Morton. We'll get a chance to talk to him a little bit later on. Just think about all the great Datsun Z cars that have raced over the years, leading up to the early 1990s when these cars dominated. This is the GTP ZX Turbo, built by Nissan and raced by great champions. People who are here this weekend are so excited to see this car, but they're even more excited to see cars like this out on the racetrack, and that's what we're going to do right now. Those early Datsun Roadsters went by many names: the 311, the 1500, the 1600, the 2000, the Fair Lady, even just the Roadster. But it was their exploits on the track that truly made their name and built their reputations.
It's a Rock Vest Datsun Roadster. Every day here I'm hearing about 1989, 1990, when him and Joe Cogbill were just all over each other, lap after lap in the e-production races here for the Nationals. 1994, he had a daughter, and the car got parked.
Family matters were also at the core of how Rock started his racing career.
When Rock was 14, he and his dad were riding motorcycles, and his dad had a fall and passed away. His backdoor neighbor was Jim Fitzgerald. Fitzy didn't have any sons. Rock no longer had a father. Within a year, Rock showed up at SCCA events, and Fitzy just walked him right in as his crew chief.
When Mike discovered that the car was for sale, he flew cross-country and began a slow and steady process that eventually paid off.
After about an hour, he, bittersweet smile on his face, said, "Let's go look at the car, let's go look at the books, let's go look at the parts." And I tell you, when I went and looked, there was absolutely no question. This car is exactly as it was found in Rock's garage. I honestly can't believe it. I'm lined up behind John Morton.
Mike successfully continued the Rock Vest Road Atlanta legacy by taking class wins in both of his sprint races. Another unique Datsun Roadster competing here at the Mitty began as a rare street car that was transformed into a race car.
My car is a 69 Datsun Roadster, 2000 Roadster, factory lightweight, special build car brought over to the United States by Mr. Katayama for the racers. There's only 2 complete cars in the United States right now, and there's parts of several others, and there's a few that have been destroyed over the years. This one was kind of neat because it's never been molested. It's been as it was built in 1972.
So what was done to earn the lightweight name?
They left about a third of the metal off the chassis and made it so it was a lot more flexible, which is not good, but then they also lightened all the panels, made them out of thinner metal. The hood and trunk hinges are made out of aluminum. The doors, if you look at the car closely, it's covered with dents because if you look at it or touch it wrong, it dents. So it's really light and thin.
Tracing the car's history is easy if you have friends who remember the lightweight when it was at Brock Racing Enterprises.
They didn't need the car, they didn't want the car, they let an employee buy it and take it home. So the guy built it, and he basically got all the parts from BRE, and all the guys at BRE were his friends, so they supplied everything. So it's kind of like a lost BRE car built by one of the crew members, and the other crew members all provided parts. So it's an interesting story.
Les's lightweight ran well enough to take a class win in its only sprint race. We've only scratched the surface of the many unique Datsuns and Nissans here at the Mitty. And when we come back, we're going to check out some of the sedans that help build the brand's reputation. Trackside Time Machines, presented by RockAuto.com, will return in a moment.
Trackside Time Machines is presented by RockAuto.com. All the parts your car will ever need.
Welcome back to the 41st annual Mitty from Road Atlanta. Datsun Roadsters were so dominant in SCCA's production categories that it only made sense that they tackled the sedan classes. So the factory hooked up with one of the hottest drivers in the country, Dave Frelson, who used a 510 to win the first of his 5 national championships.
Dickie Roberts of a Datsun competition approached Dave Frelson in late 1971 and asked him to run a Datsun 510 in the Central Division. So Datsun Comp sold this car to Dave Frelson for $1, and Dave Frelson campaigned it in the Central Division in 1972. He did very well. He won the Central Division Championship in 1972, went to the runoffs here. Unfortunately, he broke during the race. He went out to win 6 out of 7 races in 1973, and obviously came to the runoffs and ended up winning the runoffs.
Frelson eventually sold the 510, but that wasn't the end of this car's racing resume.
Then it had a number of owners after that. It was raced continuously from 1972 to 1994.
Dave found the car in rough condition in 2007, and after a 2-year restoration, it returned to the racetrack.
There was just a real satisfaction in preserving history. I think of myself as a custodian of this car. I don't think of myself as the owner. A lot of enthusiasm for the marque, and it just, the more racing I've done, it's evolved into more about the people involved in the process and less about the driving.
In his only sprint race, Dave took his yellow and black 510 to an 8th place finish in class. Another national champion winner, a 1973 B210 sedan, is also taking part in the Mitty races this weekend. And it's a story of a family connection that spans nearly 40 years.
This is the first time this car has been back to Road Atlanta since 1979, and I have the honor of driving it. We came here as kids in the 70s, and we watched my dad, Dick Davenport, and Frank Carney do incredibly well in these Datsun B210s. In fact, my dad competed for the first time in 1975, where they got 4th. In 76, they got 2nd, and in 77, 78, 79, my dad was national champion. Fast forward 35 years, I found the car. It was up in Connecticut and bought it, maybe paid a little too much for it, but sat on it for 3 years. Don Preston restored it. Owners before it had modified it. They'd put a lot of roll cage in it. They really kind of screwed it up, but Preston, boy, he put it back exactly the way it was as it rolled off the track in 1979 after my dad's 3rd consecutive national championship. And for me to get in it and drive it, it's pretty cool.
For the Davenports, the car, the track, everything about this weekend brings back memories.
Years ago, as kids, we had to clean these wheels. That was our job. So these cars would come in, wheels would be dirty. We'd be full of Georgia red clay because we'd be playing. And, my dad would order us to clean all the wheels. But now that's my big brother's job, and they're shiny. So it works out great.
The Davenports will also be shining some trophies, as Rob took the family sedan to a pair of class wins and top 10 finishes in the sprint races. To help Datsun and Nissan celebrate their honored role this weekend, Tristan Smith brought 2 race cars to the track, a 200 SX sedan and a 300 ZX sports car.
When they came and said it was going to be Nissan this year, I had to drag them both out.
The 300ZX is quite a performer, but it does have one handicap.
I like to call it my Japanese Camaro because that's kind of what it feels like you're driving. It's a 91 300ZX. When they created, SCCA created the Improved Touring R class, I decided to take a chance on this car with the new class and just built it from scratch. Other than the motor, and I had someone do the cage, everything on the car I basically built up. It's a really heavy car, and it's completely the opposite of when I get in the Datsun. This weekend particularly is really confusing because I'm literally going back to back from one car to the next. The 200SX started out as an ITB car in the early 90s, when IT, Improved Touring, SCCA class, was first being created. And at around that time, I was getting into racing, and somebody had it for rent, and so I rented it. And he said, well, it's always up for sale, and because everything always is when it's a race car. And I said, that might be a little cheaper than renting for 2 weekends. And so I bought it. And so I've been campaigning it now for about 25 years, 26 years, originally in Improved Touring. And then in the last about 10 years, I converted it over to what it raced at in the 70s, which was the IMSA RS series, which is the radial sedan series. And I've kept it, pretty close to what that would have been like in that day.
The 200SX didn't compete in the Group 2 sprint races so that it would be as ready as possible for the feature race. The 300ZX only raced in the first Group 3B sprint race as Tristan battled electrical issues.
Well, while the vintage race cars are dicing it up out on Road Atlanta's 2.54-mile road course in the infield, a different kind of competition. BF Goodrich has set up an autocross course with a couple of late model Mustang convertibles. And we had a chance to talk to a couple of folks who have been out there autocrossing.
I have autocross experience. We autocrossed in South Georgia. The only downside to me with the Mustang is the weight and the steering.
I've got to gas it, taking turns like I'm in a race.
It was fun. It's a lot better than last year. I got to ride with the guy, and he showed me all the loops and everything, and it made it more exciting.
You like to go fast?
Yes.
There's action everywhere you turn at the Mitty. And when we come back in a few moments, we'll chat with a Datsun Nissan racing legend, Grand Marshal John Morton. Trackside Time Machines, presented by RockAuto.com, will be right back. Welcome back to Trackside Time Machines, presented by RockAuto.com. So far, we've talked about the winning ways of Datsun Roadsters and the stunning success of the 510 sedans. Now it's time to catch some Z's. Not the sleeping kind, but the 240 type. And there's one person here today who has a winner's perspective on all those cars.
The Grand Marshal of the event this weekend here at Road Atlanta is a gentleman who has distinguished himself as a great champion and also a great spokesman for Datsun/Nissan throughout their entire racing career. It is John Morton. John, your racing resume has the word Datsun and Nissan on it all the way through.
There are a few other brands there, but yeah, I've driven a lot of Datsuns and Nissans.
You've seen the evolution of Datsun/Nissan through the years with their racing efforts. Kind of give us a thumbnail sketch of how things have progressed for them.
Well, they started out as a cheap economy car that we turned into, the BRE team turned into a very successful race car with the, not with the Z, but with a 510. And the Z was a brand new car that nobody heard of when we won the national championship in 70 and 71. And I think that was the impetus for the future racing success that they had.
Well, you got to be thrilled seeing the turnout here this weekend. And we had to wait several minutes to interview you because so many people wanted to come up and say hi. This has got to be exciting for you to see some of your old friends here.
It is exciting because in my own hometown, nobody knows who the heck I am. And really, that's the way I like it. This is a little intense.
In John's 2 sprint races, he took a 3rd and a 17th overall in his 240Z. Another famous Z car from the 70s is also here this weekend. It was one of the first cars imported in 1970, was converted for racing, and went on to capture the 1976 IMSA GTU Championship.
Brad Fazell started Transcendental Racing and bought this car and brought a team together, a unique team, including John Morton, who had won the championship in the early 70s, worked on this car as well, and they campaigned it in 1975 and 1976. 1976, they won the GTU championship in this car. And it ran here in Road Atlanta in 1976. And John and Brad were co-drivers back then, and they won that race as well. So it has a lot of history here at Road Atlanta, has a lot of history in IMSA GTU, and I'm a very proud owner.
David drove his X4Cell machine to a class win in his only sprint race for Group 3B. All of the cars we've shown so far will be taking part in the Nissan feature race today, and whether they're production cars or sedans, they will certainly need some factory spec parts. So does your ride, and there's one source for everything you could want.
It's a family business. We started up in 1999. We were interested in cars, auto enthusiasts ourselves, worked on old cars, and we were frustrated going into traditional auto parts stores. Were they telling us all the parts that were available or just what they happen to have on the shelves? And did they really need to charge us that much? So we decided to give our customers complete access to what's hidden behind the traditional auto parts store counter and be able to pick the parts that they best fit their needs. So you start out with the make, the year, the model, the engine size, and then there's different categories based on the systems on the car: body, ignition, electrical, air conditioning. So you go there, and then you see all the parts that are available under that category. It's a tree structure, so it's real quick and simple to get through. And all your choices, all different brands, prices, specifications are right there on one page. And photos, which makes it easy to confirm you have the correct part. It's a good research tool when you're just getting started out. If you're deciding if you're going to buy a car, how much it would cost to fix it up. If you're about to start a repair, you can go onto our site and see our parts, what parts are available, what choices do you have. You can click on the info button, maybe see installation instructions the manufacturer's provided. You don't have to get on the phone, call around town, drive. Middle of the night, you can say, hey, I wonder if they have this. Go to rockauto.com, do a few clicks, and it's on its way.
Stay tuned for more of Trackside Time Machines presented by rockauto.com, because when we return, we'll fire them up for the Nissan feature race. We're back in a moment.
Trackside Time Machines is presented by rockauto.com. All the parts your car will ever need.
Well, Nissan and Datsun, the featured marques here at the Mitty at Road Atlanta. Steve Yeager, he is the manager for Heritage Communications for Nissan of North America, and you've had a lot to do with the organization of this event this weekend.
We're thrilled to be here. We were asked to come as a featured marque, and our history goes back more than 50 years. We, in terms of racing, Bob Sharp won our first national championship over 50 years ago. We've won a lot of races, a lot of championships with our cars. It's part of our heritage, part of our DNA.
Let's take a look at some of the contenders in today's all Datsun Nissan feature race. On the pole is Jeff Borghese's Nissan-powered Lola, and alongside will be the yellow number 17 of Lawrence Cooper. In row 2 is Grand Marshal John Morton in the number 46, with number 9 Alex McDowell in a rare 1971 Skyline next to him. Other contenders include Grayson Upchurch in his number 32 Roadster. And this 240Z, number 133, is driven by Matt Crouch, with Mike Anderson's Rockvest Roadster lining up 13th. Rob Davenport is on row 11 in his father's B210 sedan, while Les Canaday's lightweight Roadster is back on row 17. Tristan Smith has decided to race his 200SX sedan. There's even one bruised and battered 240Z that is covered in signatures, and the ink may be the only thing holding the car together. And unfortunately, David Stone will have to start from the pit lane. All in all, 40 cars took the green flag, with Jeff Borghese's Nissan-powered Lola leading initially. Moments after the start, Grayson Upchurch tagged John Morton and cost him several positions. I'm not sure about the meaning of John's hand gesture, but who says vintage racing is tame? Not far behind the lead pack, a string of Z cars battle throughout the top 10. And at the checker, Alex McDowell took the win by over 11 seconds.
Alex McDowell was the winner of the Datsun Nissan feature race, and That's got to be pretty special.
It was very special. This is my first time at the event and first time racing this car here at Road Atlanta, and it was such a great time. It's a 1971 Skyline, and it's got a pretty big motor in there, inline six, and some nice meaty tires in the rear, so I get to throw it around a lot on the track, and it's just right-hand drive. Such a great thing to drive because it takes me back to those old days when the Japanese drivers used to dominate in Japan and Australia. So.
Congratulations on the first time out. Not a bad start.
Thank you.
Here are the top 10 finishers. First was Alex McDowell. Second was Grayson Upchurch. Third was Scott Kissinger. Fourth, John Morton. Fifth, Phil Hollenbeck. Linwood Staub finishing sixth. Austin Javeli, seventh. Bob Klukas finishing number 8. Number 9 was Ron Branham, and finishing 10th, Adam Strelchuk.
And that's going to do it. We hope you enjoyed our coverage of the Mitty here at Road Atlanta. Now, I get to do a little power shopping here at the souvenir trailer. See you next time. Hey, Tom, would you have one of these for somebody with an extremely massive upper body?